Another day, another education budget killed over at the Idaho State House. And today it was the budget that pays K-12 teachers for a second time this year. And in the most unsurprising news of the day, it was killed in the Idaho House for the same reason the higher education budget died last week. There are concerns among lawmakers that Idaho students are being taught social justice curriculum in public schools. Are they? And what does that have to do with the funding of Idaho teachers' salaries? Joe Paris spoke with Idaho lawmakers about the issues they see with the budget bill and the reaction from lawmakers who say it's simply getting ridiculous at the State House.
The budget for Idaho's K-12 teachers was voted down Tuesday in the Idaho House after concerns were raised during debate about taxpayer dollars going towards social justice content in curriculum and teacher trainings. Some lawmakers argued that intent language needed to be added to the budget bill to make it clear what the mission is inside the classroom.
There were some language issues that we wanted to address in there, and they weren't in there.
Assistant Majority Leader, Republican Representative Jason Monks, details the idea behind legislative intent language in relation to the K-12 education budget.
Sometimes it puts in restrictions on how you can and can't spend the money. So if we allocate or appropriate money to a certain department and we don't want them to spend it on a certain program, you could do that through legislative intent.
Some Republican lawmakers argued that language should be included in the budget bill to prevent social justice curriculum from being forced on students and teachers.
Intent language in here would just be one extra step we could do as legislators to help protect them from teaching stuff that is ideology and that is undermining our very foundations of this country. And it is happening. And schools are not like they used to be.
They're seeing ghosts. This is not something that is happening in our public schools, and to hold public school teachers hostage salary for kind of an imagined threat, we felt was very inappropriate.
House Minority Leader Alana Rubel, along with the other House Democrats and 22 Republicans, voted in favor of passing the budget, but it failed on a 34-34 tie. Democrats have expressed frustration over claims that social justice ideology is being forced on K-12 students. The reality, they say, it is not.
Somehow this turned into this fantastical story about how there was going to be, Marxist indoctrination of our youth. It was so wildly unfounded, but I guess through enough repetition on the floor, it got enough people worked up that they rejected the money.
We have seen this cancer culture phenomenon run through our country, and there's concerns out there, and we want to make sure that those concerns are addressed in all of education, so it's not something that continues to run unchecked.
Some lawmakers are raising questions about if adding very specific legislative intent language to the K-12 teacher pay budget is the appropriate role of the Joint Finance and Appropriation Budget Committee. Monk says legislative intent language for budgets is not out of the ordinary.
In an ideal, perfect world, we would completely separate those issues. With that said, it's not ideal, it's not perfect. Sometimes you have to have intent within those language. But there is a line as far as, are we crossing into policy or is this just direction on how to spend the money?
Rubel says school curriculum and teacher trainings have plenty of local oversight. We
have a lot of local control over this. We have school boards setting curriculum. We have, parental involvement. There just is, I think, no real reason for the state to come in like a ton of bricks with really strict rules on exactly what can and can't be taught in a classroom. Or at least let's wait and see if we have an actual problem before we go down that path.
All right, Joe, we've talked about this several times on this show. We have yet to see any evidence of this, but what happens now with this budget and what happens if it fails? It can't fail again, right? That has to be passed.
It can fail as many times as lawmakers vote it down, Brian. The lawmakers are only legally obligated to pass the legislation. There's no time constraints on how long that could take or how many opportunities they have for this. Representative Monks tells me this afternoon that he knows lawmakers are already working on tailoring a new budget bill for the House to consider. That could come to the House as early as the end of this week, possibly next week. In the event, Brian, though, that lawmakers vote that one down as well, be back to the drawing board again. Lawmakers, as I just mentioned, Brian, they have an unlimited amount of time to do this. They just have to pass something at some point.
And that just is adding more time to this legislative session than they probably already figured on. All right, thanks, Joe.